Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. We get together with our distribution partners and clients most weekday mornings at 8 o'clock Central to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories. We want to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligations and responsibilities to each of you. And as we get together on a daily basis, this is a good way to communicate to the masses. Please note we will be traveling tomorrow, so there will not be a Zoom on tomorrow, Friday, July 14th. But today is a really important topic to talk about. And if all is going well, you should be looking at my shared screen, which is the implementation. So over the past few days, we've been talking about the credit and funding program, how it works, the benefits to you, the benefits to the client. Today, I want to take you through the actual implementation Adobe that we send, and I'll also describe why it's set up this way, because if you don't understand the why, it might not make sense on the what. So at this point, what you're seeing here on the screen is an Adobe that's sent to the client after they've enrolled in the credit and funding. So in their inbox, they're going to see an email that is titled this: Get Your Funding, Next Step for Credit and Funding Program. So it is an Adobe. It's not a contract, but it is prompting them to initial off and acknowledge receipt of this. So for our records, their records, your records, we know that we have at least started the implementation. What doesn't show here, because I'm actually within the Adobe, it's not showing you where they would initial off, but just for your information, by each of the bold headings, there's an initial, and there's actually boxes here where they're going to pick one of these three, which I'll describe in a moment, of course. So it's a 2-pager, and then they'll sign at the bottom, acknowledging that they've received this. So what we prefer to do is that when a client has enrolled in the credit and funding program, what we prefer to do is speak with the client. So we just hired a young lady. She's going to be working full-time starting August. She's working part-time now, and her responsibility will be calling the individuals that have enrolled in credit and funding and to go through this form with them, welcome them aboard, and provide a personal touch. So I know she was on the call last night. She had 14 onboarding sessions that she did just last evening. So I'm going to role play a little bit so you see how she and I and our team would go through this form, just so you're familiar with it. And then obviously we'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns, and you would just post those into the Q&A. So we don't follow the normal order. So what we would do is, if we're on the phone with the client, let's just say Alonzo, who's one of our distribution partners. Let's say Alonzo just signed up for credit and funding, and now we're having a conversation with Alonzo. So I'm going to start the role play. If I'm pausing the role play, to explain further to you all during this webinar, I'll explain. But let's start the role play. So I'd say, hey, Alonzo, thank you so much for enrolling in the credit and funding program. It's my responsibility to get you onboarded today. And I first want to make sure, Alonzo, that you received an email via Adobe, and the subject line would have been Get Your Funding, Next Step for Credit and Funding Program. Did you receive that, Alonzo? Pause a role play. So we've sent it to him, and we'll be able to track. We'll know if we sent it to him. We'll also know if he's viewed it, and we'll also know if he signed it or not. But we're not trying to play technicalities. If he doesn't recognize it or he can't lay his hands on it, we're going to resend it to him. We're going to do a reminder, because we want him to be looking at this while we're doing the onboarding. So again, one of 3 scenarios could happen, because we will have already sent this to Alonzo, to the new client. Either he's never looked at it, he's looked at it but he didn't sign off on it, or he looked at it, signed off on it, and essentially completed it. But regardless, our onboarding is the same. We want to make sure he has it in front of him, and then we're going to go through it. So let's resume the role play. Awesome, Alonzo. So, Alonzo, if you remember back in high school or college when you'd get a syllabus when you started a class, this is kind of like the syllabus. It's the instructions to get us off to a fast start. So, Alonzo, I just want to make sure that you have it pulled up in front of you, right? Yes. If he doesn't, we're not going to proceed. We're going to wait until he has it in front of him. If Alonzo says, "Oh, I'm driving," I'd say, "Well, we need to reschedule, Alonzo. This is important. I want you to see what we're going through because we want you to be successful. And we're on the clock, Alonzo. We have 30 days to get you $100,000. We need you engaged. If this is a bad time, no worries. We'll get rescheduled." So again, Alonzo now, so he signed up in the credit and funding program. And he has this in front of him, whether it's on his phone, on his computer, it's printed out, I don't care, but he has it in front of him. So then let's resume the role play. All right, Alonzo, if you'll first scroll down, and I want you to go down to where it says 2 immediate action steps, pause of role play. It's there, right? You all see it. I see it. 2 immediate action steps. It's freaking amazing. I can talk to some people and it can take them 10 minutes to find this. It's like bizarre, but I need to get them to this point. I need them to understand the next things that they need to do. Now, I know I didn't start at the top of the page. I'm going to go back to the top of the page. But again, I'm explaining to you the process that we go through. So I need Alonzo or whomever is the client to get his or her eyes on this section of the page. So let's resume role play. All right, so Alonzo, great. So those 2 immediate action steps are 2 things that we need you to do quickly. Now, I'm not rushing you, but as soon as you can, we need you to do these 2 things because it provides us baseline information. Because remember, Alonzo, when you enrolled in the credit and funding program, we promised 3 things. Number 1, help remove negative credit items for free. Secondly, add new positive trade lines. And third, get you at least $100,000 in 30 days. So the clock's ticking. Clock's ticking for us. So with that being said, let's clarify. Here are 2 immediate action steps that I need you to engage in as soon as possible. One of which is to create a personal financial statement. The second is to do a soft credit pull. On the personal financial statement, Alonzo, do you see that there's 2 links? If he doesn't, I'm going to stop until he sees it. Okay, one is a link to the form to fill out the PFS form. And Alonzo, the second are detailed instructions because frankly, the form is not that intuitive. But this is a form that lets us know about your net worth. Second, which is relevant as we're getting your file ready for funding. And then and once you completed that, you're going to email it in to us, as you see, instructions. And secondly is a soft credit pull. No hard inquiries, no impact to your credit, but we need to get a baseline. So those are 2 things, 2 immediate action steps, Alonzo, that we really need you to jump in there and complete as soon as possible. Do you have any questions on those 2 steps, Alonzo? Pause role play. So if he has questions, that's fine. Normally they won't. We just needed to bring to their attention because even though we've put it in writing and we've sent it to the client, we want to verbally confirm they know that these are their 2 next action steps. Any questions from you all on this as we've paused the role play? Does that make sense so far? All right, Sarah's asking a question about what if the client doesn't see this. So I think the answer to Sarah's question is now that we have Madison on board, who is essentially the credit and funding program administrator, if you will, we're going to send out an additional email in addition to this Adobe, and that'll be a new process that's starting here soon, whereby the client gets an email through our CRM that lets them know to go look for this Adobe and provides Madison's email, Madison's direct phone number, and Madison's Calendly link. So essentially, Sarah, we're going to provide each new client almost a redundant onboarding experience. One is this that we're looking at and going through now, and another is an email to let them know to look for this And if they would like to schedule a call with Madison or reach out to her, that they can. We're going to really encourage them to schedule, because if we're adding 100 to 500 new credit and funding clients a day, which is great. And so we can handle the volume, but we can't handle 100 to 500 calls coming in randomly. So the real push will be for the client to use her Calendly link. Okay, so let's resume the role play. Okay, great, Alonzo. Again, thank you again for enrolling in the credit and funding program. We have made promises to you, and it's so important that we fulfill the promises that we made to you. So let's go ahead and scroll up to the top of the page now. So let's read it together, Alonzo. It says, thank you for enrolling in the credit and funding program. Now it appears you've not paid your refundable setup fee, so you're receiving this notice. So pause and role play. We've learned we've got to be a little bit sterner with people, because when they sign up, they know that there's a $999 refundable setup fee. If they want to finance that and not pay that out of pocket, that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to show you how that happens next. And that's also part of the verbal onboarding. So yes, there's a refundable setup fee for the credit and funding program. No, they don't have to pay for it out of pocket. So let's resume the role play. All right, Alonzo, so right above where we were with the 2 immediate action steps, do you see where it says, please select one of the options with the 3 boxes? Pause or role play. So again, when they get the Adobe, there's actually a box like to select here, select here, select here. You're looking at the raw document that's not delivered. It's the template. So just trust me, there's a box, an outline of a box here, here, and here. And so it's pretty visible, right? And so since we just talked to Alonzo about this section, it's pretty easy for him to look up and say, oh yeah, I see those 3 boxes. So resume role play. All right, Alonzo, great. So what we need to do is pick one of these 3 options. Do you want to pay the refundable setup fee out of pocket now so we can proceed? Or do you want to finance it, which is the second box? Or third, do you want to quit? You wouldn't want to quit. So which of those is best for you? Pause and role play. So I mean, I wouldn't force their hand. Some people are just fine to pay the refundable setup fee out of pocket. If they want to, that's fine. But if they don't, then they're going to check the second box. So that there'd be a place to check it here. So then when this comes back to us, which I'll talk more about in a moment, we know that they're not going to pay it out of pocket. That's fine, not required to, that they want to finance it. And then we will send them a funding proposal to complete so we can get them funding offers. So some of you have gotten a little bit antsy when clients sign up and then they're being invoiced for the $999. Well, sure, they're going to be invoiced from the time that they enroll. They're going to, 2 things are going to happen. They're going to receive this onboarding email, and they're going to be invoiced for the $999 because they owe it. But they certainly have the option to not pay it out of pocket to finance it. But in our opinion, there's nothing wrong with invoicing them because they need to know. Well, they already know, but it's putting them on alert. Yeah, you do owe it. That's what you promised to pay when you enrolled. But certainly, if you want to finance it, you don't have to pay it out of pocket. Makes sense to everyone? Because if people read this, then it all tends to make sense. If you don't read this, then you're thinking, well, this seems like a bait and switch, right? We say there's no upfront cost, but it says $999. They sign up and they get an invoice. Well, sure. But the analogy I like to use is at the car dealership. If you go into the car dealership, you may intend on financing that new Ferrari, but they're going to give you a purchase order that says you owe $385,000. Now, do you have to pay them $385,000? No, you can finance it. So they need to know, yes, there is a refundable setup fee, but no, you don't have to pay it out of pocket. Make sense? Okay. So then resuming the role play. Great, Alonzo. I don't want to take much more of your time. So once again, thank you for enrolling in the credit and funding program. We have promised to do 3 things for you: remove negative, add for free, add positive trade lines, and help you raise at least $100,000 in 30 days. We've promised that. It's in writing. You've made some promises too, didn't you? one of which is to participate, of course, because otherwise we won't be successful. And then the other is to pay the refundable setup fee. However, you don't have to pay that out of pocket. If you want to pay it out of pocket, check the first, look at your look in your email, you have an invoice from QuickBooks, pay it. Awesome. If you don't want to do that, it's okay. Then check box 2, technically 1B, and then we will we will send you a funding app. All right. So Alonzo, what questions do you have as we get started? Because we need you to, well, pause. So again, there's 3 scenarios with this form. Maybe Alonzo has already completed it, and whomever is onboarding Alonzo would know that. And so at that point, he's already checked the box, right? So we don't need him to complete the Adobe at that point. He's already completed it, but we'll know it, and he should know. If he's viewed it or not completed it, then we want him to complete it. He's looking at it now, so it's pretty easy. And what it will do is it'll prompt him to initial, and then it'll have him sign. It'll pre-print his name. It'll ask him to sign. It'll pre-populate date. So then it'll be like a little submit button like Adobe normally has, comes back to us, and then we sign off on it, and then he'll automatically through Adobe get an executed copy. This is not a design from our behalf, and maybe it's just my or our ignorance. I don't think so. But when the client first gets this form, these links don't work. But once they complete it and Adobe sends them an executed copy, once they've signed it and we've signed it, then the links work. I don't know why that is, but it's okay because it motivates them to complete it, right? So the point is, if they try to click on any of these links, of course, any of these links, 1, 2, or 3, they're smart enough they could retype it, but the links itself don't work until the Adobe is executed. So in summary, clients enroll in the credit and funding program. We're currently doing 2 things. We'll soon do 3 things. What we currently do is we send them this in an Adobe to get their attention. Secondly, we have someone reach out and call the client to welcome aboard and go through this. So those are the 2 things that happen now. And then the additional item that's beginning to start soon is we'll also send an email through our CRM that introduces Madison, our new credit and funding coordinator, gives them her direct email, gives them her direct phone number, and gives them her Calendly link so they could have a one-on-one discussion to go through this. It's a little bit of a conflict, right? Because at this point, the client's already signed up. The client already decided to participate in the credit and funding and is already enrolled. So in our mind, we're implementing, but in reality, we know sometimes there's still that reassurance that's necessary to get the client engaged. So we believe that number 1, this onboarding document, which clarifies our promises and their promises, gives them the option of how they want to take care of the refundable setup fee, plugs them in right away to the immediate action steps, is a credible way to do that. So at the bottom of the page, just says what happens then. It says, once we have your PFS, personal financial statement, which is here, once we have that and the soft credit pull, which is, here, we will review your file and respond. So essentially, then we can start working the client's file. We can then help them with the credit sweep, which is the removal of negative items. They don't have to pay for that. Credit boost, adding positive trade lines. If they need help verifying and boosting their income to qualify, we can help them with that. If they need help with collateral, we can help them with that. And in fact, we provide all clients that are enrolled in the credit and funding program $10,000. I don't know if you knew that or not. We probably don't speak of that enough. We literally transfer $10,000 of assets over to them that goes on their financials that can serve as collateral. So what questions do you all have? The goal today was to help you understand the initial implementation steps for clients that enroll in credit and funding program. And here we've gone through it, and we've approached it somewhat in a role-playing environment, so you know what to expect. And if you want to go through the process, you're welcome to. But if you refer clients, they'll get this and they'll get the invoice. But the invoice will say, the invoice isn't hateful. The invoice will say, hey, you promised to pay $9.99. If you want to arrange other financial arrangements, let us know. And then this, of course, is the trigger for them to let us know. So please, please, please don't be turned off or let clients get all astray when they said, well, Joey, you told me there's no upfront cost in their invoicing. Well, there is a refundable setup fee, and we tell them that, and it's in the agreement, but they can finance that, you see? Okay, so who has questions, comments, concerns on the implementation process of the credit and funding program? Any questions? Sarah's asking if she can do this with her clients that she refers in. Well, I mean, certainly, well, first of all, as a referral partner, you're not responsible for implementation. However, to the extent that you want to encourage and prompt and motivate your clients to be compliant and go through the process, that's helpful. If you want it to be three-way calls, so you're on the phone while they're being onboarded, that's fine as well. Without a power of attorney, we really can't work through the referral partner in lieu of working with the client, because we're talking about personal financial information. But so I guess the short of it is, as a referral partner, Sarah, you don't have to be involved with any of this implementation. However, you're welcome to be as involved with it as you want to be. But I think what Sarah's getting at is can she send this out? Well, we're the one on the hook, right? Because their contracts with us. We're the ones that's making guarantees. And so we need to track this and work with the client directly, because it's our butt on the line. So with that being said, you're welcome to be involved and support and prompt your clients. That's wonderful if you want to do that. It's not expected, it's not required, but it doesn't replace our responsibility to work with the client, because we're the ones that have the contractual responsibility. All right, so Tamika's got a question, and we'll go, I'll refer to it here. So remember, there's three promises that we make when someone enrolls in the credit and funding program. And of course, everything is laid out specifically in their agreement. But in summary, we are promising to remove negative credit, applicable credit items if needed. And then we call that the credit sweep, and they don't have to pay for that. So that's number one. We have credit boost, which is kind of an umbrella label, which means if we're working with them to add new primary trade lines, which gets to Tamika's question, which I'll come back in a moment. And the third part of the value proposition is we're going to position them so they're strong enough that they qualify for a minimum of 100,000 in 30 days. Okay, Tamika's question specifically has to do with credit boost. So there's many different types of primary trade lines that could be added, many different types. So what we need to do is get some baseline data about the client before we make recommendations, because we want to be objective and consultative. So the baseline data, of course, primarily comes here, those two immediate action steps. So getting to Tamika's question. So let's say that they've completed these two steps, we've analyzed them, and either one of the three things might be the case. Maybe they have high revolving utilization. I was working with a client yesterday, and he runs a successful business, over $100,000 a month in bank deposits, successful business. But his personal credit utilization is high, a little bit too high. So that depresses his score, but also makes his credit profile, makes him look a little bit distressed, maybe too dependent on credit. So he's an example of someone that we talk to, we're advising to add a new primary trade line, a revolving trade line, to reduce utilization. The point is, we need to look at the client's profile before we can make specific recommendations on do they need the sweep or not, and which accounts need to be swept, as well as the boost. Do they need new trade lines, and which trade lines? If they need trade lines, it could vary tremendously what those trade lines are. We're working with the client based upon their unique circumstances, needs, and preferences. So with that, and this gets to make this question more directly, we have the $100,000 primary trade line. Will that be what's recommended? Maybe not. I don't know. We've got to look at the data. We want to have a very consultative approach. So we're making recommendations based upon their specific mitigating circumstances. But regardless, if they're adding primary trade lines, I don't want you all to think that we're taking responsibility for that. So let's say that it's Pauline. Pauline's on the training. Well, let's say Pauline either has high revolving utilization or maybe a thin profile. She doesn't really have enough reporting on her credit that's going to allow her to immediately qualify for funding. She needs more positive credit, let's just theoretically say. So let's say that we recommend a $50,000 American Express card. Well, we're not, if there's an application fee for American Express, number one, we're not getting kickback off of it, but we're not paying that for Pauline. If she goes out and uses her American Express to book a flight to Australia, we're not paying her American Express bills. So on the positive trade lines, we're advising, we're guiding, we're directing, but please don't infer that we're taking responsibility for those primary trade lines. So please understand that. We're not a lender. We're not a bank. We don't issue primary trade lines. Lenders, banks, and credit institutions do. Those banks, lenders, and credit institutions have their own terms and conditions. And so that's what the client would be held responsible for. So yes, please don't make the mistake to think that somehow, some way that we're taking on responsibilities for their new primary trade lines, because that's obviously not the case. Each primary trade line would have their own terms and conditions, and the client could decide if they want to accept it or not. All right. Eddie's asking a little bit about the guarantee. So the trick to make this work, and I don't mean trick in a negative way, everything's legal and ethical, is that we're working on a very tight time frame, but we're working off of the premise that we've talked about a few times before. Clients in general don't want to pay anything up front. They want results fast, and we define that as 30 days or less. And they want to see benefits before they have any expense. So when we built and remodeled the credit and funding program, it's built around those three conditions. And so we'll go on the record. We will promise, we'll commit to help clients raise that minimum of $100,000. Eddie's point is, we don't know what we're getting into with each new client, right? We have no idea what their circumstances are. And that's true. And so that's why we need to get our arms around their circumstances very, very quickly. So what you're going to start to feel when you refer in clients that enroll, especially once they've either paid their refundable setup fee, which you get paid off of, or financed it, you get paid off of, is there's a sense of urgency, right? We're on the freaking clock. We've got 30 days to generate significant results. And so we'll definitely have high expectations of the clients engaging and participating, because if they don't, how are we going to get there? But Eddie's point is right. I mean, we're taking a significant burden on our shoulders to go deliver, but that's what the marketplace wants, right? The marketplace typically wants three things: no upfront cost. Well, we're able to provide that by financing the setup fee. They want results fast. We'll definitely do that. And then third, they want to see benefits before they're paying. So thank you, Eddie, for that question. Tamika says thank you. All right. So let's wrap this up. And again, we had some technical difficulties when we started. No training tomorrow because I'll be traveling. We'll be back on Monday. Today's training was to give you a very transparent and in-depth understanding of how we onboard clients, credit and funding clients. This is triggered once they've enrolled. So they will typically have gone to your replicated website, to the credit and funding page. They filled out the lead form. That takes them over to the terms and conditions. They've accepted the terms and conditions. You're notified of that. And obviously we're notified of that. So then now what we're going to do is do two things currently. We'll send them the Adobe that's titled Get Your Funding Next Step. It's this form, but of course it's interactive. It has places for them to initial and to sign, unlike this template. And they're also going to go ahead and get the invoice because they need to get the invoice. They need to know they owe $999. Do they have to pay it out of pocket? Absolutely not. If they don't want to pay it out of pocket, then they're going to select option 1B, and then that will trigger a new sequence whereby we will send them a funding application. Now, some clients will say, whoa, well, what's the qualifications? Because what if I don't get approved for financing? Then I'm between a rock and a hard place. Everyone will get approved for at least $999. We have a micro lender nonprofit that will finance anyone for that amount. Now, hopefully, they'll get funding offers that are a lot more than that. They might get $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 of funding offers immediately that could be in their pocket as soon as next day or over the next couple of days. That's fine. But they'll get at least enough financing that covers the refundable setup fee. Now, I want to close on this because this is important. If you're a pessimist, you'd say, well, oh shit, Tom, what we're doing is they're taking out credit to pay for that refundable setup fee. That's horrible. But the truth is, it's the opposite of that. Because what did we promise? We're going to help them improve their credit. How do you improve credit? By opening trade lines and paying as agreed. So this, in fact, could be their first trade line that reports positively, that improves their score, that makes them more fundable. So please understand that when people come to you and I for the credit and funding program, they're coming to us looking to borrow money. They want to become qualified enough to borrow at least $100,000. That's the deal, right? So it may be that the first amount that they borrow, if they don't want to pay out of pocket, which they don't have to, would in fact be to pay for the refundable setup fee. Now, that first tranche, that first round, it might be a lot more than just the $999, but we'll make sure that they get at least the $999. That creates a new trade line that improves their credit. And again, it keeps them from having to pay that out of pocket. So if you look at this as it is, it makes tremendous sense. It's a great value, but it just requires your understanding of the model. All right, so again, no training tomorrow because of travel. If you have questions, you can let us know, and we will get back together on Monday morning. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.